Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Voices from the Mausoleum, and welcome back to another Christmas edition of Spooky Sunday Stories. Um, Man, these, you would think when you get to like Christmas horror that eventually people will run out of ideas, but the level of creativity that goes into things that have to do with Christmas horror is just like, so. Without further ado. The short that I am reading today is called The Last Noel, and this is by Hailey Piper. As always, I will put her information in the description for this episode. This story originally appeared in Gothic Blue Book 6, A Krampus Carol from Burial Day Books. Yeah, so that's it for my intro. We'll just jump in. The Last Noel by Hailey Piper. Snow began to fall as Dominique watched her parents' minivan pull out of the driveway. Where the suburban street curved, their headlights washed across a red and white figure standing on the sidewalk. It might have been a Santa statue or someone strolling through the neighborhood. Dominique pressed her face to one glass sidelight for a better look, but the minivan drove past the unknown figure and out of the subdivision, and the sidewalk went dark once more. Most neighboring houses stood empty tonight, their lights off, their families having abandoned the cold north for a beach bum Christmas elsewhere. No one should have stood outside, and if anyone walked the street, they walked unseen. Likely no one wondered the coming snowstorm, though. The minivan must have passed some odd street side decoration, nothing more. Dominique would spend Christmas Eve alone. Almost. Stamping feet shook the sidelights beside the front door. Dominique sighed hard, fogging the glass, and turned to her 8-year-old sister, Eliza, who hunched like an ogre and stamped her feet again. "Eliza hungry," she shouted in a guttural voice. "Feed Eliza, or Eliza eats Santa." Their parents had put off hiring a babysitter until the last minute, and now the job had fallen to Dominique. She didn't blame Eliza, but if this little girl was turning into an ogre, it was their parents' fault for turning the big sister into mini-mom. After a frozen pizza dinner, Dominique pried open Eliza's advent calendar, handed her the last chocolate, and led her into the living room where Dad had stacked holiday-flavored books. Family tradition dictated that Dominique read a Christmas book to Eliza every Christmas Eve. She plucked up a slime picture book on Christmas Day and leafed through. Every illustrated page began nearly the same. On Christmas Eve, Santa came to the house. On Christmas Day, all the children woke up to presents. On Christmas Day, the family gathered for Christmas supper. It was the shortest book in the stack. "How about this?" she asked. But of course, Eliza picked out a weathered children's edition of A Christmas Carol, likely because it was the longest choice and meant she could stay up later. Dominique didn't put up a fight. She sat in their mother's soft chair while Eliza plopped into the floor, clutching chocolate in her mouth where it slowly liquefied. "Jacob Marley was dead from the start," Dominique read. She skipped words and sentences where she could get away with it, but the reading took its time and the evening closed shadowy fingers around the living room. By the point where Jacob Marley came dragging chains into Scrooge's bedchamber, she wished she'd vetoed the book choice. Anything else, so long as she didn't have to read about ghost and death while she and Eliza sat alone on Christmas Eve. The snow only made the windows feel darker, the room smaller. Their house had to be a beacon in the gloomy neighborhood. A ghost could look in any window, invisible in the dark, while Dominique and Eliza shone brightly in the living room. And it came to be known that if anyone knew how to hold Christmas in his heart and keep it the year round, it was Ebenezer Scrooge, Dominique read, closing the book at last. The end. Eliza hopped up. "You'd get so much Christmas if you cracked Scrooge open like an egg." Her tongue was somehow still brown with melted chocolate. Dominique cupped Eliza's face. "When you grow up, you're either going to end up Queen Elizabeth or Lizzie Borden." Eliza scrunched her face. "Who?" "Never mind, squishy cheeks. Bedtime." Eliza yanked her face from Dominique's hands. "What about Christmas Eve present?" Would this night ever end? But Eliza was right. Every year, she opened a present on Christmas Eve and put on the new pajamas that she found inside. "Get out Santa's milk and cookies," Dominique said, starting upstairs. Eliza stomped through the living room and kitchen. Their parents hid presents at the closet's top shelf every year, too settled in routine to notice the girls' arms were getting longer, that Dominique would probably surpass their heights in a year. Eliza's pajamas sat beside Dominique's new lacrosse stick and several other gifts their parents hadn't put off wrapping them. When she left for college someday, they wouldn't have a clue how to handle the silly little beast downstairs. She grabbed the pajamas, stuffed them in a paper shopping bag, and started back through the upstairs hall when she heard a knock below. She drifted into her bedroom where one window overlooked the front of the house, not wanting to go to the foyer where whoever was there could see through the front door's side lights. Snow piled thick on the outside seal. Someone loomed over the front door. Dominique couldn't make out much detail through the snowfall, but a red Santa hat and red coat with white trim stood out through the storm. A stranger, dressed in a Santa suit, much like the figure she thought she'd seen in headlights earlier. Someone in that outfit would only be wandering the blizzard and knocking on doors if they expected children to answer. Winter reached through the window and froze Dominique in place. "Go away," she whispered. "Whoever you are, just go." The red and white figure pounded again. Creaking hinges answered it, shattering the glass from Dominique's bones, the sound of the front door being opened. She tossed the shopping bag aside and tore through the upstairs hall. "Eliza, shut the door," she shouted. But what would a little kid want to see more on Christmas Eve than Santa Claus? "Eliza, be smart this time, please." Halfway down the stairs, Dominique spotted the front door hanging ajar, its doorway empty, but for the snow-coated welcome mat. There was no Santa Claus, no Eliza. Dominique hadn't heard a scream. What next? She had to call Mom. No, better to call the police. No, Santa was getting away with Eliza. Dominique charged down the steps and out into the driveway. Freezing snow engulfed her feet, but she didn't go back for her boots. Some fleeting hope told her that if she chased now, she could bring Eliza back right away and Christmas Eve could go on as if no one had knocked on the door. Lengthy two-toed tracks winded across the backyard and into the thick wall of snow-covered pines. Near the edge of the trees, a red Santa hat lay in the snowdrift, quickly being buried. Snow didn't used to fall this thick and fast when Dominique was little, but it had become normal these past 2 winters. If she didn't hurry, the tracks would vanish in the night and Eliza with them. Needle-coated branches dusted her with icy flakes as she crossed into the woods. There was little light, black clouds having smothered the stars and moon, but she made out the vague bluish shapes of trees and boulders and the two-toed tracks in the snow. Neither the stranger nor Eliza offered a sound. They were so quiet that Dominique almost barreled into them. She mistook the tall stranger for an odd boulder at first, the way the back bent, and might not have scuttled behind the tree if it hadn't been for the sudden song. "Noel, Noel," the stranger whispered in the sandpapery voice of chain-smoking grandmother. "Noel, Noel." Her limbs and ribs were gaunt, her skin nearly snow-white and sticking to her skeletal frame. Bones bulged at knobby points. She wore nothing but the red and white Santa coat. Her face was a sunken skull, the teeth jutting long past her lips. White breath puffed up her throat. Noel, Noel. The Noel creature wasn't human, but she knew Christmas somehow and had at least heard this song. And she knew that donning a Santa suit might trick an innocent little kid. Her long 2-fingered hand clutched tight around the mouth of a bulging burlap sack that rested between her feet. It was too quiet to be Eliza. She'd never been quiet all her life. A dark, damp patch stained one side of the sack. "Don't be dead," Dominique almost whispered, but she bit her lip. Desperate fingers slid into her pocket for her phone to send a text to Mom. Calling and speaking would be too loud. Her fingers turned up nothing. She'd left her phone at home along with her boots. She hadn't even closed the front door when she ran into the storm. But there was no heading back. She would never find Eliza again. The scrape of the burlap sack dragged her attention back to Noel, who hauled Eliza deeper into the dense pine trees. "Noel, Noel," she crooned. "Noel, Noel." It was the only word she seemed to know, barely keeping in time. Each time she slowed, she sang again, louder. "Noel, Noel." When Noel swept behind a tree, Dominique was only 10 steps behind. The woods darkened, but her eyes adjusted, and they never left the sack. She didn't stop again until Noel planted herself on a fallen tree trunk, breath puffing out in tired clouds. The sack remained stiff and quiet. How much time had passed since they left the house? Dominique couldn't guess without her phone's clock. She didn't like when Noel paused. Stillness made it too easy to feel the sting across her nose and ears, but those breaks were her best chance to snatch Eliza. The weather was wearing Noel down. Dominique could relate. She dipped one foot into one of Noel's tracks, and then another, and then froze. Even if she could sneak up and open the sack before Noel noticed, what if Eliza was too hurt to run? Dominique could carry her, but neither far nor fast. Black eyes snapped in Dominique's direction, but she ducked behind the nearest tree. Noelle's howling scream chased her, echoing across the stark white woods. The black shape of a deer charged out from between the trees, scattering snow and sticks in its wake. Noelle pounded one fist on the fallen tree trunk, its bark denting under her knuckles, and then she started off again, dragging the sack alongside her. Noelle, Noelle. She was strong. Had Eliza not opened the door, Noelle would have knocked it down. How many empty houses had she broken into their street before she found theirs? Dominique hurried after her and tried not to glance at the bruised fallen tree. The march seemed endless. Twice Noelle dodged out of Dominique's sight, but only for a moment, as if she knew she was being followed, but had little energy left to evade her pursuer. Still, she slowed as the night drew on and the woods became thick, up until she and her burlap sack vanished down a sudden slope. If she paused at the bottom of the slope and looked back right away, she might see anything that crested the top. Dominique waited a few paces from the edge. 1, 2, she whispered, clenching her teeth to keep them from chattering. Snowflakes clouded her hair and dripped down her shivering back. She could hardly feel her fingers and toes anymore. 99, 100. That was long enough. She approached the white dip. Noelle had moved on. Below, a clearing opened around an enormous pine tree, its trunk and branches far larger than any other in the woods. In the surrounding snowbank lay shredded bits of shiny wrapping paper, a broken wooden rocking horse, a steel baseball bat and leather catcher's mitt, dolls with missing limbs, and action figures still in their plastic blister packs. Unlit Christmas lights had been thrashed across the pine's sagging limbs. Noelle's blue-white shape rested on the far side of the clearing, the sack again between her feet, her back turned to the slope. Dominique crept downhill in the clearing's edge, where sudden warm air breathed across her numb face. The world split away beside the tree, a window hanging in the air that opened on a coastal Christmas. White snowbanks faded into the afterimage of white shores, where 3 sets of 2-toed footprints formed winding trails in the sand. Creatures like Noelle might have easily walked from beach to woods had this warm place formed a full picture. But it was a faded vision now. Any broken doorway had healed over, once more a window, locking out anything that had wandered through. And there was something else beneath the tree. Dominique crept on hands and knees toward the trunk, where 2 bodies lay in the snow. They were like Noelle, skeletal, knobby at the joints, their faces sunken and their teeth jutting outward, but smaller, maybe Eliza's size. No breath clouded from their mouths. The bones of the small animals lay in their laps. Unlikely they had starved. Had they frozen to death? More colorful than bones or bodies, the cover of the picture book on Christmas Day lay half buried in the snow at their feet, price sticker intact. Torn out pages had been stuffed into the creature's arms. One depicted Santa Claus approaching a small house, sack at his side and billowing with toys, a baseball bat, rocking horse, and dolls. On Christmas Eve, Santa came to the house, the page read. Another showed gleeful children scampering toward a decorated Christmas tree in their living room, its underside piled with the last illustration's toys. On Christmas Day, all the children woke up to presents. Dominique looked at the scattered toys, Noelle's tattered Santa coat, and the dead little ones, and thought she understood what Noelle had tried to do. Another waterlogged page faced up from the snow, showing parents and children encircling a table set with a Christmas feast. On Christmas Day, the family gathered for Christmas supper. Dominique eyed Noelle, back still turned, and then the burlap sack at her feet, where Eliza had been stuffed. And then Dominique eyed the steel baseball bat. Noelle, Noelle, the song began again, weaker now. Dominique timed her steps to the lyrics, each footfall finding Noelle's tracks, until she reached the baseball bat and lifted it. She had never played baseball or softball, but the bat wasn't much heavier than a lacrosse stick, and she was the big sister. She would figure it out. Noelle shivered, breaking the song, her breath scraped out in a ragged sigh. Dominique stepped closer. Every moment's hesitation was another moment of Eliza stuck in that sack. Had Noelle hit her? Could she breathe? Dominique took another step in one of Noelle's footprints. Fresh snow was already filling them. Noelle, Noelle. Another step. Dominique was closing in. 2 more, and she raised the bat across her shoulder. Its chill ate through her shirt. A low, scratchy moan escaped Noelle's throat. She was exhausted and cold, but if her fist could dent a tree, they could do worse to a human skull. maybe worse than a steel baseball bat. Dominique's strike had to be sure. Almost there, she took another step. Small, sinewy bones cracked beneath her heel. Of course, Noelle had eaten before tonight. There was no telling how long she'd been stranded in the woods, long enough for her young to die, but she was alive, alive and carnivorous. Dominique wrenched the bat from her shoulder. Noelle glanced back, her black eyes frozen in despair, as if she had already realized that reenacting the pages of O Christmas Day would not make her children wake up on Christmas morning. Steel crashed against her head, spraying black blood across white snow. She fell sideways, limbs jittering. Dominique raised the bat over her shoulder again and readied another swing. Noelle became still. Dominique tossed the bat down and hopped over the body. The sack had not been tied, its mouth having been twisted closed by an unyielding fist. She dug her hands around its burlap lips and yanked it open, hair and damp skin brushing her fingertips. Eliza? She started to close the sack and then opened it again. Open or shut, which was worse. A rattling scream tore from deep places inside her and rang through her skull. It wouldn't end, even when she forced her mouth shut. The woods didn't echo. Snowfall drowned most sounds, the world becoming isolated and silent, and its cold fingers reached through Dominique's face, hands, and heart. She couldn't tell how much time had passed since the knock on the door, but the long walk had to have drawn her close to midnight. It would be Christmas soon. She reached back inside the sack, hugged Eliza tight, and hoped that Noelle turned out to be right, that all children would wake up on Christmas morning. No. That was The Last Noel by Hailey Piper. Once again, I will put all of her information in the description for this episode. Thank you so much, Hailey, for letting me read this. This was heartbreaking and beautifully written. I always feel like you have to follow up saying something was horribly upsetting, but like in the horror world, we just come to know these things as good things, right? Like we want to be devastated. So anyway, so I'll put her information in the description for this episode so you can go check her out and find some other things. She's written way more than this, so definitely check her out. Thank you guys so much for listening to another horror Christmas short. I will be back next Sunday with another one. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great week coming up, and I will see you in the next one.